Hello. Today we are going to talk about the Arthurian legends, otherwise known as the legends surrounding the character and historical figure King Arthur. Okay, so first of all, just a reminder of the difference here between a romantic hero and an epic hero. So, romantic heroes really come about in the medieval period. The epic hero goes back to the ancient period. So, an epic hero, an example of that would be Beowulf, who is a character that seeks to become legend, has battles to survive, has a specific enemy, meaning Beowulf knows exactly who he is fighting, and it's very clear the identities of the good character versus the evil character, and is the perfect embodiment of morality and strength. So whether you are talking about Odysseus from ancient Greece or Beowulf, the ancient Anglo-Saxon poem, both of those characters as epic heroes embody perfection. There are no moral flaws in an epic hero. Okay, so a romantic hero is a little bit different. So a romantic hero has, first of all, a religious sense of duty to conquer evil. So he's not just conquering evil or battling because he desires to become legend. He's conquering the evil because it is the morally correct thing to do. A romantic hero also has adventures, not just for survival, but adventures from which he seeks deeper meaning. Often, the romantic hero is ignorant of his enemy. There is often a twist at the end of a romantic tale where we learn the true identity of the villain or the foe at the end. But that identity all through the story until the ending has been concealed in some way. So the enemy is mysterious. A romantic hero also does not have to embody perfection. A romantic hero struggles to find solutions to problems. The struggle means that the romantic hero often makes mistakes and is a sinful person, but usually overcomes those moral flaws or those sins by the end of the story. So there is definitely a Christian influence in the romantic hero versus the ancient epic hero. Okay, so as far as King Arthur, the legend has been done many times. Okay, Arthur is a romantic hero, as are his knights, like Sir Lancelot. These are characters that fit that definition now that we've moved into the medieval period. The legend has been redone many times in many different languages over many, many centuries. So there are different versions of it, from different times and different places. The details differ depending on which version you're reading. However, there are some basic points to the Arthur legend that usually, are the same. And the legend begins with Arthur as the illegitimate son of King Uther Pendragon and Igraine. The affair between Uther and Igraine results in Arthur's conception. Because he is illegitimate, Arthur grows up not knowing that he has the claim to the throne of England by birth. Arthur is raised without knowing that he is the rightful king of England. That becomes clear when he successfully withdraws the sword from the stone. Okay, some versions, the sword is Excalibur. In other versions, it's another sword. Okay, but whatever the legend is, whatever the details are, Arthur is surprised by performing this impossible task of pulling this magical sword from the stone. No one can remove the sword because it is magical. Remember, medieval romances contained the supernatural, but that performing this impossible task proves that Arthur is the King of England. Arthur possesses Excalibur, his magical sword. Again, in some versions, it is the sword in the stone. In others, it is not. But Excalibur is a magical weapon that only Arthur is truly meant to wield. It's a little bit like Hrunting from Beowulf. Okay, remember Beowulf had his own special sword, but Excalibur possesses magical qualities. So it's different in that way. The sword is given to him by the Lady of the Lake, who is an underwater sorceress. Arthur's enemies include his sister Morgan Le Fay and his nephew Mordred. Mordred is the polar opposite of Arthur. He does have claim by birth to the throne, but he's usually seen as an unnatural king, a king who brings England to destruction and darkness and chaos. And so he is a powerful king like Arthur, but a king that does much destruction, as opposed to his uncle, Arthur, who brings England to its peak levels of greatness. Mordred manages to mortally wound Arthur just before Arthur wounds Mordred. And so they kind of cancel each other out in man-to-man combat on the battlefield. Arthur is taken to Avalon for healing, which is kind of a magical place. And the legend ends with all of England waiting for Arthur to return and bring England back to its greatness. Okay, so 5 points of chivalry. Okay, so these are the code of chivalry that all knights must follow. Humility, which is the opposite of arrogance. Knights must be humble. Piety, which means that the knights have a religious duty to God to do right. Integrity, loyalty, and honesty. Okay, characters and terms. First of all, Merlin is the court magician and also a counselor to King Arthur. Merlin is a mentor to Arthur and leads him, instructs him in the qualities of a good king. If you've ever seen the Disney cartoon, The Sword and the Stone, it features Merlin changing Arthur into different animals and teaching him lessons that will one day help him as king. Okay, and that is mostly from a book called The Once and Future King, which is a later novelization of the King Arthur legend, and a very good read if you're interested in a more contemporary version of the story. The Lady of the Lake, as I said, is the supernatural creature who inhabits an underwater kingdom, and she is the giver of Excalibur to Arthur. Avalon is almost sort of like a purgatory. It's an island for healing. In some legends, it is depicted as a world of the dead or a version of the afterlife. Supposedly, that is where Arthur is after he's wounded in battle fighting Mordred, and the legend ends with us waiting for him to return, the once and future king. Guinevere and Lancelot. So Queen Guinevere, Arthur's wife, has an affair with Sir Lancelot, which is who is Arthur's most favored knight. Their illicit affair foreshadows the downfall of Camelot. So this is the first break in the kingdom of Camelot, Arthur's kingdom. The round table is what Arthur creates for his knights to sit and meet. This prevents them from quarreling among each other because no one is above the other. They are all equal at the round table. The round table is a symbol of brotherhood and honor in King Arthur's court. Okay. As far as Mort d'Arthur, which is the end of the legend, the death of King Arthur, it is not entirely clear who wrote Mort d'Arthur, since many people bore the name Sir Thomas Malory. So we don't know exactly which Thomas Malory is the author of what we are reading in your textbook. But there are suspicions that Thomas Malory, who served in Parliament in the mid-1400s, is probably the author. He was repeatedly imprisoned for various crimes, including murder. There are long passages in Mort d'Arthur where the author is praying for forgiveness and praying for freedom. So it's possible Thomas Malory was writing the whole story from prison. Malory probably wrote the tale during this time, if it is that Thomas Malory, because, again, there are long declarations and prayers for deliverance. So it's likely that it's this one particular Thomas Malory from the medieval period. Okay, Mort d'Arthur is an important work from the 15th century. It is the most famous work from this time period. It is also important because it is prose, meaning a work of non-poetry in English and a chief source of information on the Arthurian legend. So remember, the medieval period is long before we have the bound novels available to the general public, long before the public was literate enough to read long passages of the printed word. So most people during this time period would have still been reliant on the oral tradition, and most people would storytell through poetry in the form of song or performance. But the King Arthur legend is a long piece of writing in prose, and that makes it the forerunner for today, what we call a novel. King Arthur was probably a real person, a real historical figure dating back to the Celts. If you remember, the Celts existed in England before the Anglo-Saxons came over from what we know today to be Sweden, and kind of that part of Europe. So the Celts, an earlier group of people that inhabited England and Ireland, might have been the source of this legend. If there was a real King Arthur, he probably dates back to the tribal chief from this era. Scholars believe that Arthur may have led the Celts of Britain in various battles against the Saxons. Over the century, the character of Arthur rose to prominence in the oral tradition. He existed long before it was written down in the medieval period in Mort d'Arthur. And the reason for that is Arthur is the romantic notion of the greatest true king, the one who can lead his country to the epitome of greatness. To refer to something as a Camelot means to refer to a utopia, and a utopia that has since fallen. Okay, so the legend. Mort d'Arthur tells the story of King Arthur and his knights at the Round Table. Arthur, who is the son of King Uther Pendragon but was raised by another family, takes his rightful place as king when, as a boy, he is able to pull the sword called Excalibur from the stone. Although he rules wisely and is counseled by Merlin the magician, Arthur makes enemies of other kings and is often at war. In The Sword and the Stone, after Uther's death, the kingdom is in jeopardy, every baron struggling to seize control. Merlin goes to the Archbishop of Canterbury, tells him a miracle is coming soon, and advises him to assemble all the lords of the kingdom at Christmas. They come to find the sword lodged in a stone, and on it the legend reads, "Whoso pulleth out this sword from this stone and anvil is duly born king of all England. No man can budge it, and to keep them in hand, the Archbishop arranges a New Year's Day tournament. To this tournament, a knight of low station, Sir Ector, comes with his son Kay and the child Merlin placed in his care, Arthur. On the way, Sir Kay loses his sword and sends Arthur back. Arthur brings the sword from the stone. He comes across it and pulls the sword successfully from the stone. When they hear of this, the barons are outraged at the thought of being ruled by a boy, and a boy of lower station at that. They postpone their decision on Arthur's kingship again and again, but at last accept it at the urging of the commons, and Arthur is crowned. He redistributes the land, redresses old wrongs, and extends his realm, bringing England to a utopia called Camelot. In the death of King Arthur at the end of the legend, King Arthur goes to France to confront Lancelot, his favorite knight, about the affair with his queen Guinevere. Arthur returns to England to battle his nephew Mordred, who has usurped the throne. Mordred forces the battle with the king's men, and in the fighting, Gawain, another nephew of Arthur, is killed. Gawain comes to Arthur in a dream with a warning about going to war with Mordred. The dream contains a vision of snakes. The war begins with an accident involving snakes. Arthur strikes down Mordred on the battlefield, but not before Mordred mortally wounds Arthur in return. When Sir Lucan tries to lift Arthur with Bedivere, he loses his guts through an opening in his abdomen in a wound and dies. Arthur orders Bedivere to throw Excalibur into the lake. Bedivere betrays Arthur again and again because Excalibur is so powerful and it's just too tempting to throw it back in the water and return it to the Lady of the Lake. At the end, Arthur goes to Avalon for healing. Arthur possibly is dead and entombed. Bedivere guards a tomb for the rest of his life, believing that Arthur has in fact died and is resting in this tomb. The other possibility is that Arthur is still alive out there somewhere in Avalon, being healed, and that he will one day return the once and future king. Since we see Arthur taken away by boat to Avalon, and we also see a hermit report 3 women with a body wrapped for burial, both endings are possible. Okay. All right, and that is the background for the legend of King Arthur. You are responsible for reading The Sword and the Stone and Morte d'Arthur, the end of the legend.